Good afternoon. So you have a basic idea about what is going to happen? What? Detailed discussion of economic survey is going to happen post 3 to 4 classes of discussion of basics. So this week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and if possible, one more class on Sunday. We are going to first discuss the basics of these concepts. Then only we'll start with the detailed discussion. Because a lot of time what happens in the economic survey discussion is that the economic survey, a lot of terms don't make sense, a lot of concepts don't make sense. And when the analysis is presented, तो link नहीं हो पाता है. The link becomes a problem. This is why first 3 4 classes we are going to discuss the basics of macroeconomics. And in the basics of macroeconomics, I'll not talk the basics of growth and development. Majorly जो part करेंगे उसमें I'll try to tell you the concepts which are actually working right now. For example, recently the government has said in the budget that they are going to shift from fiscal deficit as the target for fiscal discipline to now the debt to GDP as an anchor for fiscal discipline. तो उसका टारगेट सेट किया है फॉर द नेक्स्ट 5 years which they had mentioned before also. Now what exactly is the dynamics of why debt to GDP or why fiscal deficit has now not been chosen as the primary target? So fiscal discipline pe I'll talk about certain things. In the budget, what are the different deficits and how do we finance the deficit? What is the debt profile of the government? So we are going to discuss the basics, but we're going to also go one step ahead so that the present debate when it happens in the economic survey, क्योंकि हर चैप्टर की अगर एक क्लास है तो उसका एनालिसिस ही ज़्यादातर प्रेजेंट होगा, उसके बेसिक्स नहीं समझाए जाएंगे. So these 3 classes I'm going to choose certain topics from the macroeconomic sections which is then going to enable you understand what is happening in the survey. The survey ka discussion for the next 3 classes is not going to happen. This class I'm going to start with the topic of fiscal policy. I'll discuss deficits and the debt pattern of the government. Debt pattern maybe I'll tell you the classification ke what exactly is the debt of the government, what is counted as public debt, what is counted as external debt, what is extra budgetary debt, the off budget borrowing, and how exactly are these. The analysis is the economic survey. कि इसका trend क्या चल रहा है. This is what is being mentioned in those chapters. What exactly is the classification and meaning is what I'm going to explain here. Similarly, I'll pick another topic in fiscal policy, that is fiscal discipline. That if the government has to limit the targets, what exactly is the rule behind it and how exactly the rule is being operationalized. The whole context of it, what I'm going to present, so that when in the budget class you read about debt to GDP का anchor बनाया है, तो वो समझ आ जाए. So the idea of this class, so for in external sector also, I'm going to talk about internationalization of rupee or de-dollarization. For example, there is a term which is being mentioned in the news in the last 3 4 days, that is the international, the trilemma. What exactly 3 things cannot happen together? So वो अभी actually हो रहा है. So those concepts I'm going to give you here, so that when you do the budget and the survey, these things make sense. वहाँ पे फिर कम टाइम लगेगा, नहीं तो फिर वो रिवाइज करने में बहुत ज़्यादा टाइम लगेगा. So what you can take these 3 to 4 classes as the static covering of the syllabus. You know it very well. It is a revision. You have doubts, you can ask, but this is what is going to happen in the next 3 to 4 classes. Just like fiscal policy, I'm going to choose external sector. After external sector, I'm going to talk about the basics of growth, development, and money. So basics clear हो जाए ताकि वो growth is necessary for development but not sufficient, ये वाली statement का confusion ना हो. And when we discuss about the GDP trend patterns in the economic survey, you have a clear picture what is GDP, inequality, poverty और ये सारे mismatches कहाँ से आ रहे हैं. I hope the pattern of the classes is clear. So these 3 classes would be talking about the basics of the subject so that you are able to maintain the interlinkages whenever the discussion starts. The economic survey discussions, since there is too much overlap, not everything will make sense if you don't revise the basics well. So ये 3 classes वो basics का revision होगा. I'll show you how exactly this class is important or these 3 classes, how then it will make sense. वो survey का जब पढ़ोगे तब वो पता चलेगा कैसे वो connect हो रहा है. Is the pattern clear? What exactly is happening? I'll start with the first topic, that is your fiscal policy. Here you understand what is a budget, what happens in the government budget, what exactly is presented, what is being talked about, estimates of what year and what exactly, estimates of what? Revenue, expenditure and what? आइडिया क्या है बजट का? फॉरगेट गोइंग इनटू द टेक्निकल्स के रेवेन्यू क्या है और कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर वट एवर द एक्सपेंडिचर एंड द रिसीट्स आर. टेल मी द ब्रॉडर आइडिया के व्हाट हैपेंस ऑन द 1st February एवरी ईयर. अच्छा, ट्रांसलेशन, वाओ. दिस इज व्हाट आई एम सेइंग कि वहां तो हम बाद में जाएंगे, But what exactly is the document talking about? वो तो उसका content हो गया. See, budget is about same grammar add कर दी. There are two things which the budget is talking about. It is talking about what is the priority of the government. Where exactly does the government want to spend that money? So for when you read the analysis, you'll read about how a social sector welfare spending कम कर दी है. Or you'll read about how apprenticeship scheme को बोला था job creation के लिए वो उसके पैसे कम कर दिए हैं. So that money is giving me the analysis that I want to know what is the priority of the government in this 1 year. If this would have been a multi-year budget, I would know the priority of the government in the next 3 to 5 years. एक मेंस में टॉपिक है GS3 में government budgeting. That government budgeting is actually a topic which can talk about these dimensions, that why we need a multi-year budget. 1 year is a less time frame in order to know about what the priority is. The first thing is what exactly is the priority of the government. Now when you say what is the priority of the government, priority पता कैसे चलती है? Priority comes to know from the money they are spending. Where exactly am I going to spend the money? And when we talk about where I'm going to spend the money, I first need to know where the money is coming from. So the whole idea of budget is, it is telling me what exactly is the priority. Priority is coming from the expenditure of the government, and this expenditure comes from the receipts of the government, whatever the government is collecting. So this sets the base. Okay, we come to know in the next 1 year, this is going to happen. Money is going to come from here, and money is going to go here. Next thing is, once you come to know that this is what the government has planned, this also becomes a tool for the accountability to the government, that you can ask questions based on this number. That if you have spent 50,000 crore rupees in this particular scheme, what did you achieve from the scheme? Normally, what the budget does in India is that you tell what exactly the scheme is the government has announced, and you talk about what exactly is the expenditure that is happening on it. ये सबसे basic form of budget होता है. This is called as the line budget. What exactly is going to happen from this expenditure? I want to know the output that was created. From this output, I want to see a change in the economy. I want to know what exactly is the outcome. When you analyze on these fronts, then only you can hold the government accountable that this is what the problem you are having. So the whole idea of a government budget is that you tell me the priority, based on which you give me the numbers. I'm going to ask you questions on that. What exactly happened to those numbers wherever you spend that money? If there is a mismatch between the two, I'm also going to ask you questions why there is a mismatch, why there is less revenue collection, why the deficit is not increasing. And this is why we have another dimension added there, the FRBM law, that we need to have some discipline on how much borrowing the government is doing. I'll discuss in detail about that law because that law is something which is critical for the exam. Multiple questions have come on FRBM law and also the encasing panel. Uske और sophisticated questions can come again. Because last year, if you see the paper, there were 3 to 4 questions on fiscal policy, but they were only asking about deficit. कि primary deficit का मतलब पता है नहीं पता है, capital receipts का मतलब पता है नहीं पता है. This year, they can go one step ahead in those things, asking about details of how exactly the debt is managed, what exactly is the fiscal deficit front. The fiscal discipline, that is the FRBM front. Already some statements have been asked there. So once you know the scheme, you know what is the money is being spent. ये output outcome framework भी बनता है. Niti Aayog helps in designing this, which helps the parliament in asking questions from the government. Why are you spending money here? And what exactly is the output or outcome you've achieved, or whether you have achieved it or not. This is the general idea of budget. Now, when we say it is the general idea about where the money is going to be spent and from where the money is coming, there are 4 types of figures and 3 types of year. सिर्फ एक यही नहीं एस्टिमेट होगा कि नेक्स्ट ईयर क्या स्पेंड होगा. आई एम ऑल्सो गोइंग टू गिव यू द प्रीवियस ईयर and also the present financial year certain financials. What exactly happens there? Does anyone have an idea what total numbers are presented in the budget? Finance minister जो बोलती है वो budget speech है. That is not the entire budget. She is only talking about the next year, that is, what is the upcoming financial year? The upcoming financial year starts from 1st April, that is 2026 to 27. So she is making the announcement of the budget estimates of expenditure and revenue. The priority is reflected in the budget estimates, and this is what is the budget speech. But this is not the only figure that is present in the budget. The present financial year, I will have 2 types of figures. I will have what exactly did I present in that year, the budget estimates, and what exactly are the revised estimate. जो present financial year है 25-26, If you see revised estimates also कि हमारा ये expenditure कम हुआ है तो ये हम पैसे यहाँ लगा सकते हैं. If I need more, I'm going to ask for it. This is what you would have read in polity, supplementary grants and all that. वो वहीं यहाँ पे use होता है in revised estimates. And what actually happened of the previous financial year? I am going to provide the actual figures. That is going to be 2024-25. So this is what exactly is the entire budget. So if you read the budget documents, you'll find data across 3 years presenting 4 types of figures. This is what is the speech of the finance minister. Rest is the present financial year budget estimates and revised, and the previous financial year जो actuals उसका पूरा year खत्म हो गया है. Present financial year is still not over. So this is why I have the concept of budget estimate and revised estimate. Why budget estimate and revised estimate is important? Anyone explain this? ये mains में बहुत important है for government budgeting. What do these two numbers tell me? No, what is, but इसका real life implication क्या है? What you are telling me is कि हमने सोचा था मनरेगा में we are going to give 5,000 crore, but now we have estimated that मनरेगा needs 2,000 crore more. See, the difference between the two is what tells me what is the quality of government data and how government is good at forecasting these data and also implementing this. The NK Singh panel in 2017 said that the government is not very good at doing this. How do we know? Because every year if we see the budgets, budget estimate or revised estimate में बहुत बड़ा फर्क है. That means they don't know how to balance or how to make those particular estimates in the budget. In the budget estimates, if I've announced that from disinvestment I'm going to receive 1 lakh crore rupees, but from 1 lakh crore I've only received 5,000 crore rupees. That means there's a huge difference. ये revenue सोचा था 1 lakh crore का, revenue came only of 5,000. So this means your forecasting is poor, and this is why your budget making exercise is something where you need a support. Just like monetary policy needs support, with the RBI you created the monetary policy committee. For the government you need to create an independent fiscal council. This fiscal council is something which is a feature of most of the developed world. The Congressional Budgetary Office, वो गवर्नमेंट के साथ एक बॉडी बनाई है ताकि आपके जो सारे डेटा हैं इसमें थोड़ा द सिस्टम बिकम्स बेटर, दैट यू नो व्हाट हैज टू बी डन एंड हाउ इट हैज टू बी डन. The Independent Fiscal Council does not tell me which political direction, Manrega or not, is something you have to decide. But how much the Manrega would need money is something I can tell you better. Because government would not be able to know that. This is why developed economies have that. And also the NK Singh panel in 2017 said India also needs an independent office which can help them improve their numbers. Just like monetary policy has been taken away from RBI and given to monetary policy committee. उसमें 3 member RBI के and 3 members come from outside RBI. Similarly, I'll bring outside members in the Independent Fiscal Council, which is going to help you improve this. I'll talk about this more in FRBM. That if I move away from the FRBM targets, how do I move away? When do I move away? When do I come back? Usme bhi I need expert opinion. That expert opinion is not present with the government. I need an independent fiscal council. तो ये budget estimate, revised estimate में जितना बड़ा gap है, वो बताता है कि आपको कितना problem है in managing the numbers. That what you are quoting in the budget is not what actually you are doing. So that means you need help here in estimating what numbers you need. Is it making sense? The budget comes out with 3 years and 4 different figures. The budget estimates of the upcoming financial year is what is the budget speech. Is this idea clear what is the budget? Now after this, how is the budget? What is the classification of budget in the country? We divide the budget, and this was done in 2017. From 1951 till 2017, though 2014 they had abolished, India had a planning commission. This planning commission used to give money to various sectors. Why? Because we had to plan for the economy. Do you understand what is planning for the economy? What is the meaning of planning? उससे फिर ट्रांजिशन समझ आएगा कि क्या क्या. UPSC asked this question in mains. What is the revenue and capital classification of the budget, and why did India move away from plan, non-plan to this? 2012, there was a committee established under the chairmanship of C. Rangarajan to study this change. Do we need this classification or not? He recommended plan, non-plan classification should not work anymore. We need a classification of revenue expenditure, revenue receipts, capital expenditure, capital receipts. This is a full-fledged why question in mains, क्योंकि mains में topic mentioned है government budgeting. उसके बेसिक्स भी पूछे जा सकते हैं और उसका एडवांस क्वेश्चन भी आ सकता है, कंसिडरिंग व्हाट एग्जैक्टली हैपेंस टू बजटिंग इन इंडिया. फॉर एग्जांपल, दिस ईयर दे आस्क्ड अ क्वेश्चन ऑन द स्टेट फिस्कल हेल्थ इंडेक्स. Now, state fiscal health index comes from fiscal discipline, comes from FRBM. So if you understand the making of a budget, you understand deficits, you understand control of deficit. Even if you don't know the exact contents of the state health, the fiscal health index जो नीति आयोग ने बनाया है, you could have attempted that answer. 15 mark का question came this year in mains. It draws from this basic itself. So Planning Commission, I'll just give you a brief overview what was happening. Planning Commission used to frame a plan for 5 years. They used to break this plan into annual plans, and this annual plan, they used to give money to the various ministries in the budget. So the budget used to carry a classification of planned and non-planned head. Planning Commission is different from Niti Aayog in one fundamental function, that Planning Commission used to distribute money. The Niti Aayog distributes nothing. Niti Aayog is only a think tank for policy aid. It's not distributing any sort of money. This money, if has to be distributed, which Planning Commission used to do, is being done by Ministry of Finance. I'll explain in detail how exactly the center-state fiscal relations also work. Now, this budget used to have a plan, non-plan distinction. The 12th five-year plan ended in 2017. So after 2017, the budget had three major reforms. The first reform was that we are going to start our expenditure from 1st April. So the budget would be introduced from 1st February. So if in polity you've read, the budget takes 2 months of passing because there is demand for grants given to the departmental related standing committee. वो उसको पूरा analyze करेंगे. So it takes a lot of time. So now the budget gets presented, the committee work starts. When the committee submits, the parliament will debate on it. When the parliament will debate on it, they'll pass it. तो जब pass हो जाएगा तो 1st April से वो खर्चा शुरू हो जाएगा. This is why the date was advanced to 1st February. The second thing they had done was they merged the rail budget with the general budget, and third, they cancelled the planned non-planned expenditures, the distinction of the budget, and they brought it into revenue and capital head. These were the three reforms introduced in 2017. That no longer our budget will have a plan and non-plan distinction, because planning itself is now not relevant in the country. We have abolished the Planning Commission. Secondly, also one of the reasons the Rangarajan committee said कि जो non-plan head में हम लिखते हैं, this gets preference or priority over this. So in one particular year, I gave money for the construction of a particular highway. That highway also needs repair and maintenance. So construction money comes under the plan head, but repair and maintenance comes under non-plan. And since my budget has a major priority towards the plan heads, non-plan activities are not being given the due reference what exactly they have to. तो ये बहुत ज़्यादा ignore होता है component, but a component is very important for the economy. Just one example I gave you, that construction money, scheme money comes from plan head, but the repair money comes in the non-plan head. So we are ignoring this because we think planning is the most important thing. So this is why economic rationale also says you should not use this distinction. And this is why 2017 we moved to a single distinction that was of revenue and capital. These were the three reforms which were introduced in the year of 2017. Now when we talk about revenue and capital, what exactly is the distinction between the two? You have the revenue head and you have the capital head. What is the distinction? ये basics हैं सब. I'll take the discussion one step ahead also after this, but what exactly is revenue and capital? नहीं, revenue पे incoming होगा, revenue पे incoming is receipts, and revenue पे outgoing होगा, that is. One question was asked on this only in last year prelims. Which of this is revenue expenditure, which of this is capital expenditure? ये बहुत basic था, इससे आगे भी they can create this difficulty also here. Capital pay you'll receive something, that is receipts. Capital pay also you'll, right? But difference क्या है? दो account हमने अलग-अलग बनाए क्यों? What do you mean by core and non-core? There would be something you would define. फिर core non-core में तो फिर वो plan non-plan हो जाएगा. Don't you think when you define something as core, you give it more preference, more priority? And if you give it more preference, more priority, then you're coming back to plan non-plan. That the government this year said, plan mein we are going to create more infrastructure. So that becomes my core activity. Other things get neglected. So for example, I am not giving or not increasing the salaries of government employees, or I am not giving money for repair and maintenance of certain infrastructure, or I have reduced the money for subsidies, right? For example, I'll give you this year budget only. They said कि जल जीवन मिशन में अब सेंटर गवर्नमेंट पैसे नहीं देगी, जो बचे प्रोजेक्ट हैं वो स्टेट गवर्नमेंट पूरे करे. दैट मीन्स इन द कोर, if Jal Jeevan Mission was important for me, I defined it as core. This year I said it is non-core. Do you see the priority exactly where the difference is? But do you think Jal Jeevan Mission is a non-core activity? Do you think repair and maintenance of the roads is equally important? Subsidy money is equally important. The salaries pension is equally important. तो जब आप कोर नॉन कोर कर देते हो ना, फिर आप वो कोर नॉन कोर का जो डिस्टिंक्शन है, एवरी ईयर यू गोइंग टू फील समथिंग इज इंपॉर्टेंट एंड यू गोइंग टू गिव मोर मनी. नेक्स्ट ईयर यू फील दिस इज नो लॉन्गर इंपॉर्टेंट पॉलिटिकली, यू गोइंग टू शिफ्ट इट टू नॉन कोर एंड देन द होल प्रोजेक्ट गेट्स शेल्फ. तो वो नॉन कोर यही प्रॉब्लम थी प्लान नॉन प्लान की. The previous chief economic advisor, one before him was this Arvind Subramaniam. Arvind Subramaniam, he said, okay, if you see in revenue heads also, if I am calculating the salaries, you can't even say that is non-core because salary of a government employee is what depends the efficiency of the government. तो अगर हेल्थ केयर में किसी डॉक्टर को सैलरी दे रहा हूँ या स्कूल के टीचर को सैलरी दे रहा हूँ, if I reduce this saying it as non-core, it is going to impact the human capital formation in my country in the next 20 years. So this distinction of core and non-core is a political distinction which can change every year, which is going to have both economic and social outcome impacts. वो नहीं कर सकते हम. वो प्लान नॉन प्लान के सबसे ज्यादा क्रिटिसिज्म वही था. Rangarajan committee, he spent 50 pages on this only, how exactly you are treating that, and even if it is important, it is not giving you political points that year. Economy के लिए बहुत important है वो चीज. What's the distinction? See, the whole idea is revenue impact, revenue, whatever I'm measuring, incoming and outgoing, is not going to have a long-term impact on my economy. That means the impact is not going to carry forward for more than 1 year on me. This 1 year on me, the economic definition of this 1 year is that do I have an impact on my asset or liability or not? If I have an impact on asset and liability, that means it's a long-term impact. If I create asset, if I dilute asset. You understand what is the meaning of an asset? Asset is something which gives you a long-term benefit. Earning aati hai asset se. Liability is something which you owe. So anything that impacts my asset liability structure, it's automatically a long-term impact. So if you reduce your liability, अब आपको interest नहीं भरना पड़ेगा loan पे. तो वो एक long-term impact है. But if you get certain money which you have delivered a service for, this is not creating anything long-term. So if the government has collected toll on certain roads, it is not creating any long-term impact for me. So anything that has a long-term impact means economically it has an impact on asset and liability. If it does not have an impact on asset liability, that means it is short term. So short term is what is revenue, and a similar distinction exists in the BOP accounts also. The short term which does not impact my capital, my asset or liability, that is current account of balance of payment. Anything that is a long term impact for me, that is my capital head. Capital head mein asset liability, same distinction hai. So now when I have a distinction of what happens long term to me, I am going to create distinction on asset liability. If anything changes on asset liability, automatically under capital head. If it does not, it is under revenue head. Now revenue head, I am saying the money has to come to the government without creating asset liability. Whenever you are going to receive money, you can only receive money when you can dilute asset or bring a liability. So वो वाला bringing an asset, diluting an asset or bringing a liability, वो यहाँ count होगा. I am receiving money on capital head. I will either receive money when I will remove an asset or I will take on a liability. Is this making sense? Capital head will always have long-term impact. This is why asset liability se distinction hoga. You can only earn money when you sell your asset or you are going to take a liability. Now, what is the asset which the government can sell so that it receives money? Bonds, how? Bond to borrowing hoti hai. Bond is the debt instrument. When I will take a liability, then I will issue a bond. Bond is something which will be here, not here. So when I'm selling asset, I can sell assets which I own. So this is selling of the asset is disinvestment, or you can say a complete asset sale. This is first. Disinvestment also, the government defines disinvestment in different ways. If I am 100% government here, going from 100% here to 100% here is what is the process of disinvestment. Disinvestment policy is also important. Iska bhi question ban sakta hai is saal. Now, whenever the government crosses the 50%. Economic survey you will find they have given a particular reference to disinvestment. They say कि एक जो गवर्नमेंट कंपनीज हैं उसमें 50% से कम कर देना चाहिए गवर्नमेंट को, and 26% is what they can hold so that they can have some say in some of the decisions. This is how you should redefine disinvestment in the country. Without losing complete control, you should allow the government to shift away from 50%. What exactly? I'll tell you the reference why they made this. The moment you shift from 50% here, the government loses operations and management control. Government is a minority shareholder just like other players. Government does not make the majority decision when the government moves away from 50%. This is what is called as strategic disinvestment. See, strategic disinvestment दो type की होती है. One type of strategic disinvestment is when you give that particular segment to a private player. This is what is called as privatization, where the private sector is now holding the majority of the shares. The second is when the government sells its shares to another PSU. For example, the government was holding, say, just an example, 70% share in IDBI Bank. Government either can dilute from 70% and go to 26% by selling it in the market. This is what will be called as privatization. But if the government sells it to another PSU, for example, the government said LIC will now take 50% of its shares. This is also strategic disinvestment. So strategic disinvestment means two things. I'm privatizing it, selling it to a private player, or I'm selling the majority of my shares to another PSU. दोनों केस में government की direct holding 50% से कम हो गई है. In both these cases, the government shareholding has dropped below 50%, even though indirectly it is holding through LIC. Directly, it should go from less than 50%. This is what is called as strategic disinvestment. So strategic disinvestment means two things. One is privatization. Now it's private hands, or it's to another PSU. Government shareholding has been less than 50. When the government reduces up to 75%, this is what is called as minority sale. Here, no major decision making changes hands. The government is still the major decision making owner because 76% is what the government has. But the moment government shifts less than 75, that means the government comes out to be 74% and 26%. This is called as strategic minority sale. What happens in strategic minority sale is the Companies Act says some of the decisions of the company require 75% ownership. 75% अगर majority होगा तभी वो decision होगा. Now the government is now at 74. That means government will need someone else to pass that decision. This is why this is called as strategic minority sale. What they are saying in this year economic survey is disinvestment decision should be changed from 50% to bring it to here where strategic disinvestment will happen at 25%. ये economic survey ने एक reform बोला है that you call it privatization when the government becomes less than 25 also. 26% से भी नीचे जाएगा. This is something you will read in the economic survey. This is going from 100 till here. Any point is called as disinvestment. So the moment government sells any of its shares, it will be counted under capital receipts. Complete asset sell happens when you are making it completely 100. Is it making sense? I have diluted my asset. What is the meaning of dilution of asset? That I am going to give my decision making power away. कंपनी नहीं बिक रही है, डिसीजन मेकिंग बिक रही है क्योंकि हमने शेयर्स बेचने शुरू कर दिए. And whatever money I am going to get from this, I am going to record it under because my asset is being control over asset is being diluted. This you should know. Disinvestment doesn't mean that now your government will start selling off the companies and companies machinery and all. Government is no longer having the decision making power कि company run कैसे होगी. When it crosses 50%, then someone else is deciding. Government की जरूरत नहीं है most of the decisions. Is this clear? What could be other capital receipt which is asset dilution? Money is received and asset is gone. Yes, that would be when you are recovering the loans. The center government can give loans to state. The center government can give loans to PSUs also. When I'm recovering the loans from them, loan is an asset for the one who's giving the loan. Why? Because the loan will give them interest income. So when you recover the loan, you are going to destroy your asset. Both of them will be counted under capital receipts. Then what will be liability? That will be borrowings. FDI नहीं आएगा यहाँ पे. FDI is something completely different. How is FDI borrowing? आप समझ आ रहा है सर्वे से पहले क्लास क्यों हो रही है? How is FDI borrowing? Question यही आते हैं आसान से. In fact, in 2019 में they asked a question, what is the meaning of FDI? And the correct answer was FDI is a largely non-debt creating capital inflow. And you are saying it's a borrowing. Answer ही गलत हो जाता है. Liability में we count the borrowings. What are the government borrowings? Whatever the government is borrowing internally and whatever the government is borrowing externally. What exactly is the government borrowing externally? How does the government borrow externally? I'll relate this to the complete debt profile also. How? Institutions. Anything else? See, one thing I'll tell you here. Government of India, for borrowing inside the country, issues a government security. This government security cannot be issued outside. मसाला बॉन्ड इज समथिंग एल्स और वो गवर्नमेंट इशू नहीं कर सकती, वो रूपी डिनोमिनेटेड डेट है, वो एक्सटर्नल कमर्शियल बोरोइंग है. When I say government cannot borrow outside by issuing government security, that means government does not take loans from commercial sources outside. Private players do it, and this is called as external commercial borrowing. वो bonds issue करते हैं, foreign currency convertible bond, foreign currency bond. If it is rupee denominated bond, it is called as a masala bond. Government issue नहीं करती है. Government sovereign is not issuing any security. That means it is not borrowing from commercial sources. If it is not borrowing from commercial sources, how it is borrowing from outside then? How it is borrowing? Major two sources are multilateral sources. There was one multilateral source where they asked the question this year. Which body they covered this year in prelims? They had asked a question on IBRD, International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, जो World Bank का एक arm है. Maximum money, if you read the debt profile of the government, which again survey will cover, the government takes from, any idea from what institute government takes maximum loans? IMF SDR का अलग ही concept है, वो तो it's counted as a loan, but it is not a loan actually. The maximum money government takes from is ADB, Asian Development Bank. The next two agencies are agencies of the World Bank, that is IBRD and IDA. Last year they asked a question on ADB. They asked one of the facilities and they asked which of the following organization this facility is associated with. That is ADB. Then apart from bilateral, they also take from, or multilateral, they also take from directly countries, bilateral. Bilateral sources could be country to country. Any idea which countries we take the maximum debt? These are the three countries where maximum loans come in the country bilaterally. The third form is what is called as the other government debt. Now understand this carefully. इसका mention बहुत बार survey में भी है, budget में भी है. Now what is other government debt? I am not taking from sources outside, but can I allow other sources or investors to come outside from outside and invest in India? FPI coming and investing in government securities in India. Do you think this is an external debt? What do you mean by foreign portfolio or foreign institutional investment? Short term means what? What do you mean by short term or long term? FPI, FDI, any capital that comes from outside is foreign investment. When does it become a direct investment? When? Why 10%? It becomes 10% because I am seeking, I want decision making over the asset. So RBI said control और decision making हमारी country में तब आएगा जब आप 10% से ज़्यादा लगाओगे इसमें. So 10% and more is what I classify as FDI. And if it is unlisted company, चाहे 1% लगाओ, 2% लगाओ, वो पूरा ही FDI है. This is the control you are seeking. Why? Because you want to make money out of this asset, which is a long-term profit. So you want decision making. So 10% से start होते हो, 100% तक ले जा सकते हो. Different sectors have different regulations. Where exactly this is being defined? Foreign Exchange Management Act. ये सब define करता है कि कहाँ से कौन सी investment कैसे classify होगी. When I don't seek a control, that means I am coming in the country only for short-term profits. I don't want to make any decisions. I just want short-term profits. Short-term profits के लिए I am going to invest in your stock exchange. So I can invest in your debt. I can invest in your equity. Other instruments also. And this is short-term. That is, I seek no control. If you don't seek any control, that means I can anytime go out also. FPI selling net equities. You can anytime go out and in. You can make this particular transaction on the trade markets just like anyone else is making the transaction in the stock markets, where your debt and equity instruments are being sold. Since this can create a lot of volatility, this is why these are called as hot flows. Or hot flows pe, there's a tax which has been proposed. This is what is called as Tobin tax. कि जो शॉर्ट टर्म के लिए करेंसी की ट्रांजैक्शन होती है कि आज आप $100 लेके आए और कल आप $90 निकाल रहे हो एक दिन के अंदर, ये बहुत वोलेटाइल है फॉर एनी पर्टिकुलर इकोनॉमी. दिस इज व्हाई दिस शुड बी टैक्स्ड. दिस इज व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज Tobin tax. India does not have a Tobin tax, but India has something akin to Tobin tax. Similar, वो क्योंकि डोमेस्टिक पे भी लगता है, ये तो फॉरेन के लिए बोला था टोबिन ने, बट डोमेस्टिक पे भी लगता है वो. एंड दिस इज इन द बजट दिस ईयर ऑल्सो. यस, दैट इज योर security transaction tax. But this applies to everyone, whoever is trading in the market, buying, selling anything. This STT will always apply. This is why financial market is a very important topic this year also, just like they have covered in the last 2 years, because of the so many developments that are happening in the financial markets. Questions are expected not from banking. Yes, they can cover it, but financial markets se bahut question aa sakte hain. This STT itself can become a potential question. Is this FTA FPA clear? Now coming back to our original contention, government is not issuing government securities outside. But if government securities, the FPI is investing, do you think this is external debt? UPSC asked this question last to last year. Can foreign portfolio investors invest in government securities in India? They can, but can this be counted as external debt? Why no? Whom are you taking the debt from? Someone outside? You are not going to them, they are coming to you. But you're still taking debt from someone who's not in your country. So the first form of other government debt is what the FPI will invest in government securities in India. So external debt has 3 components: multilateral debt, bilateral debt, and other government debt. Another component which is just written for accounting terms, which is actually not a debt, is what is your IMF borrowing you have done in the form of, ये दोनों जगह लिखी जाती है, बैलेंस होता है. One is written here in your other government debt, and the other it is written in your foreign exchange reserves. Your reserves are also the SDR what you've got from the IMF. Another third small component is the government had taken rupee debt from the erstwhile USSR for 2 purposes. One for buying civilian components and the other for defense components. This is what is your sovereign government debt. What the government takes from outside. Multilateral, bilateral, and this is external debt only. One question they've already asked there. I'll tell you what the new developments have happened here. Now, when the FPI will invest in government securities, there are 3 routes available. Though ki regulation change hui hai, this is why this was in news this year, and surveys also covered it. The foreign portfolio investment, which is a external debt the government has taken, comes in 3 different forms. There are 3 different types of regulations here. One is called as the medium-term framework. What is this medium-term framework? Whatever FPI can invest in dated government securities, whatever they can invest in treasury bills, and whatever they can invest in state government securities, state development loans is what they are called. You know the difference between the 3? The center government can issue 2 types of securities. One is called as dated and the other is called as T-bill. Ye bhi question UPSC in 2017 asked this statement, that which is the highest form of debt in the country. Dated government securities, treasury bill, and all this is how they mentioned in a statement that out of the total debt government has taken, maximum debt is taken in the form of dated security. It's not T-bill. T-bill mismatches के लिए है, वो maximum date dated ही होगी हमेशा. What's the difference between the two? Dated security is taken for more than 1 year. Treasury bill is taken for less than 1 year. It has 3 maturity days, 91. And the other difference, which they've also covered in detail, that treasury bill is issued at a discount at face value. So अगर face value उसकी 100 है, तो 100 पे नहीं जाएगा ये. It is going to go at, and it does not offer a, there's no coupon, discounted at the face value. Similar, Center had issued since 2019, 9-10, they have been issuing certain securities again for short-term mismatch of finance. Treasury bill is for short-term mismatch. Dated is for long-term if you need that money. Similar to treasury bill, they have issued something called as cash management bills. इसका भी reference आएगा सर में बहुत जगह. Cash management bills. These are similar to treasury bills. The only one difference is treasury bills has 3 maturities. Cash management bills are only issued for 91 days. So center government issues 3 types of securities: dated for more than 1 year, treasury bill for less than 1 year discounted, and 3 terms which they can issue, and cash management, which is just like treasury bill. So you can have a question on this also in prelims. So what do you mean by a cash management bill? Can state governments issue it or not? In the country, state government can only issue long-term bills. I'll tell you why. Short-term के लिए इनको एक center एक instrument देता है. That is called as intermediate treasury bill. Auction treasury bills was the earlier name. Now they are called as intermediary treasury bills. वो state के लिए है. Otherwise, the state cannot issue any bills. How this mismatch happens, I'll tell you on that particular phenomena. But state can only issue one type of security, that is state development loans. This is what is the name of the state government security. And this I can tell you how exactly this phenomena is working. Just a small concept related thing, which is actually happening in the economy. Hindu covered it last month. You understand these 4 types of securities? Now, if the repo rate is being reduced multiple times, you know repo rate? The benchmark interest rate which decides the cost of money in the country. This is the benchmark. How is it defined? The rate at which the banks borrow from the RBI. Though repo has multiple things, without bank also it can work. I'm talking about the RBI repo. Now, if the repo rate is reducing, you know how the government the sector yield should behave? What should happen here? What is the yield of government security? What do you mean by yield of government security? The rate of return which you can get. Now, if any particular investor knows the bank is offering less, knows that the bank on both loans and deposits is offering less, do you think the government security yield will fetch him more? Do you think it will fetch him more? किसी भी investor पे at a point has 2 options. Let us say the basic 2 options. Either go to the bank or go to the market and buy government security. Why? Because government security is classified as near money. You will go close to money because government will not default. Government will always give you. So if A is holding this particular government security and he wants to sell, what will happen to the yield if the repo rate is less? अगर रेपो रेट हमारा 5% से 4% आ गया है, इस पे 6% रिटर्न मिल रहा था, will he sell it at more than 6 or less than 6? Automatically 5 पे आ जाएगा. Is it making sense? So the government is right now facing an issue where repo rate has reduced, government security yield is also reduced. The cumulative effect of this is what? The interest rates in the market will be reduced. बैंक ने भी पैसा सस्ता कर दिया, गवर्नमेंट के पेपर पे भी रिटर्न नहीं है तो उसमें भी पैसा सस्ता है. गवर्नमेंट बॉन्ड is the benchmark for cost of capital. If government is getting at 5%, everybody is going to get more than 5%. If a government is getting at 6%, everybody is going to get more than. Cumulative effect is the interest rates in the market should reduce. Till now it is making sense. But what is happening is, state government in the last 2 years, their expenditure has increased multiple times what exactly the revenue they are collecting. For example, number of schemes the government is asking the state to do it. If the state governments have to spend more than what exactly the revenue they are getting, state will have to issue more debt. If the state is issuing more debt, the state development loans, what will be the yield on that? If you keep on taking more debt, तो state जब issue करेगी bond, वो पहले 5% पे issue कर सकती थी, अब कितने पे करेगी? It has to offer at 6. If my burden of debt increases too much, I have to offer it at also. Now think from the perspective of X. He was getting from the bank 4%, he was getting from the government security, but now he is getting 7% from state loans. So what will happen here? What will happen? अगर अंडरस्टैंड, ये बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग कॉन्सेप्ट अभी बना है इकोनॉमी में. रेपो रेट इज लेस, कॉन्स्टेंटली गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटी यील्ड इज ऑल्सो गोइंग डाउन. गवर्नमेंट की यील्ड सिर्फ रेपो रेट की वजह से कम नहीं हो रही, गवर्नमेंट फिजिकली भी प्रूडेंट रहा है, फिजिकल डेफिसिट कंट्रोल रहा है, तो यील्ड बहुत नहीं बढ़ी है. दीज टू आर मेकिंग सेंस. बट सडनली द स्टेट डेवलपमेंट लोन्स, द यील्ड इज इंक्रीजिंग. Why? Because the state government in the last 1 year have to spend more than what revenue they are collecting. Now these three phenomena are making sense. अगर ये yield बढ़ती है, someone who has to buy this bond, someone who has to buy this bond, he knows he's getting more here. What will happen here? The demand will decrease. If the demand will decrease, what happens to price? प्राइस कम हो जाएगा. प्राइस कम होगा तो yield को क्या होगा? तो इसकी yield बढ़ जाएगी. अगर ये yield बढ़ गई, what will happen to market interest rate? The market interest rate will, this is happening in the economy right now. Despite a repo rate cut, despite central government controlling its yield, we are facing higher yields on, which is pushing the market interest rate. You'll find this discussion in the economic survey. Let's go one by one. ये वैसे मैंने कल या day after करना था. What is repo rate? The rate at which banks lend money or get money from. तो अगर रेपो रेट कम होता है तो बैंक्स का कौन सा रेट कम होगा? पहले तो वो लोन रेट कम करना पड़ेगा क्योंकि पैसा सस्ता मिल रहा है. दूसरा, डिपॉजिट रेट भी कम होगा. Why? Because if you are getting for cheap, I will also not get money from the people at higher rates. तो अगर मुझे आरबीआई ने 3% पे दे दिया तो मैं आपको 8% से क्यों लूँ पैसा? मैं भी आपसे 5% पे लूंगा. तो डिपॉजिट रेट हैज रिड्यूस्ड. This is first. The government security, because of number of reasons, the yield is falling. Government is getting money cheaper. Why? Because government has shown fiscal discipline. ये रेगुलरली हम कंट्रोल कर पा रहे हैं. 4.4 पे आ गए, 4.3 टारगेट रखा है, तो यील्ड कम हो गया है. Yield come and repo rate less. Loan rate is less, yield is less. This means the market interest rates are less. Because government bond is also a benchmark for the borrowing. जिस परसेंट पे गवर्नमेंट को पैसा मिल रहा है, everyone will get on that benchmark only, more than that. So if the benchmark itself is falling, market interest rates are expected to. Till now, anyone has a doubt? No, not 3.4. I'll tell you that dynamic also. They made an amendment in 2018 and they said we'll reduce it to 3%. But happened pandemic. So the act still says 3%, but in 2021, the finance minister made a particular budget speech. From that speech, now we are taking what the rules are. They said 3% in 2018. Okay, 2018 में we are setting fiscal deficit 3%, 21 तक 3% achieve होना चाहिए. Because of the pandemic, government had to borrow. It increased to 9.2. So then the finance minister in 21 said, okay, we are going to reduce it to 4.5 till 2025. 4.5 last year achieved. This year she said, I'm going to achieve 4.3 next year, but a fixed nahi hai. I'm going to target debt to GDP. I'll explain that domain separately. That has nothing to do with this. When I am prudent, market gives me benefit of that, they reduce the yield. When I am not prudent, I'm not disciplined, the market demands more money from me. Till now, anyone has a doubt? Are these two making sense? The third phenomena here is that the state government is not able to manage this. That means state is spending more than what exactly it is Now, if it is spending more than collecting, its debt is increasing. If debt of any particular person or any particular entity increases, the debt increase means the yield on its bond will increase. So if I was borrowing money at 4% earlier, I am borrowing more, the market will enforce discipline. If I borrow more than this also, the market will enforce more discipline. Making sense? Now see two things happening. एक इन्वेस्टर है, उसके लिए 3 इंस्ट्रूमेंट है. वो बैंक के पास जाए, यहां पे वो सेंटर गवर्नमेंट की सिक्योरिटी खरीदे, या वो, if this is the 3 options he has, compare these 2 options. One instrument is offering me 4% and the other instrument is offering me. Both of these options have the government guarantee behind it. State की guarantee है तो center की भी guarantee है, दोनों की government guarantee है. So which instrument is this person going to buy? What will happen to demand here? If its demand will decrease, price will decrease. If price will decrease, what happens to yield? It goes to. So don't you think this yield increase of state development loans is actually pushing the market interest rates even when repo is reduced and government security yield is less? So state government discipline is now playing a major role in the market with respect to interest rate. This is the whole discussion of the fiscal management chapter in the economic survey. I've just given you a gist of it. इसके reasons वो वहाँ पे समझाए हुए थोड़े थोड़े. ये connection बनाना आना चाहिए. Hindu explained this in quite detail, that how state government indiscipline is increasing the cost of capital in the country. If this cost of capital will increase, I will have a problem in reviving my investment, especially investment being done by private sector. So despite RBI loosening the liquidity condition, despite the government being fiscal, prudent, and they were controlling its yield, the state government indiscipline is impacting it. With this, you would also have read a news कि हमने तो टारगेट सेट कर लिए हैं ग्लाइड पाथ के डेट टू जीडीपी पे, आप भी ये चीजें करो. कॉन्स्टेंटली ये 20 दिन से न्यूज में आ रहा है. नाउ यू मेक सेंस व्हाई इट इज इन न्यूज. दिस इज कमिंग जस्ट फ्रॉम द बेसिक्स. Any doubts with respect to this? So state government, coming back to, can issue state development loans, and how they play a role is what we've discussed. Coming back to the discussion, FP and government security is what is an external debt. What exactly are the roots or the frameworks for it? First is called as medium term framework, under which every 6 months to 1 year, RBI will specify how much you can invest in these 3 types of security. Your limits to investment in different instruments are specified by the RBI every 6 months to 1 year. This is called as medium term framework. So FPI, when comes in the country and wants to invest in government securities, it has certain regulations. Regulations with respect to how much you can do. This how much is defined under medium term framework. Is this making sense? The second regulation here is called as the fully accessible route. What is the meaning of this fully accessible route? Certain government securities, dated securities, you can invest without limit. Out of the total securities, I'm going to choose certain securities where you can invest without a limit. This is why this is called as fully accessible. And finally, to control the volatility, there's the third route called as voluntary retention route. What this voluntary retention route says, if in my country someone is investing and they are retaining voluntarily for some time, I am going to give them certain relaxations on regulations. If you are going to retain your investment, say for 3 years, and you are yourself saying that I'm going to retain, I am going to give you. So 3 types of facilities available for foreign investors to invest in government security. One is the medium term framework where I specify limits. Second is fully accessible route where I specify certain securities where it is without limit. And third is voluntary retention route. If you retain, you have the idea behind retention कि volatility नहीं होगी. Voluntarily retain, I'm going to give you relaxation. These two terms is what you will find a reference to again and again in both the newspaper and the survey. Fully accessible route और voluntary retention route का कुछ guidelines change किए. These two routes are with respect to FPI investment in government security. Are these three clear? So we were discussing the multilateral, bilateral and other government debt of the government. This is your asset and liability on the capital head. Asset reduction was disinvestment and loans recovered. Liability was borrowing. Internal and external debt is this. Internal debt also I'll talk about when I talk about debt profile. Till now it is clear. What is the capital expenditure which can the government do? These are the capital receipts. Capital expenditure will include two things. One, it will build an asset and it will reduce a liability. What exactly is asset building? The infrastructure. Anything else? Defense is again part of say infrastructure. Anything else? Schemes. Schemes में भी वो जो asset बनेगा वो होगा. Scheme का component बहुत हो सकता है. Asset is loans given. I'm creating an asset. What about reduction of liability? Not interest. Repayment of principal amount. Interest is revenue. Is this clear? What exactly is the capital distinction? Asset building, liability reduction, and when the money is received, asset reduction, liability building. Are these capital head clear? Coming back to revenue head. What happens under revenue head? There is no specified differently. Revenue, the government is receiving money. How does the government receive money under revenue head without having impact on asset liability? The government collects tax and what are different types of non-tax revenue? See, there are two types of non-tax revenue, the broader head. One is what is the administrative services which the government is selling. Fees, fine, license fees, passport fees, everything is that an administrative cost. The second is type of a commercial revenue which the government gets. Commercial for selling goods and services. Collecting toll from roads, education, healthcare, electricity, postal stamps, railways, वो सब उनका commercial revenue है. Apart from that, administrative and commercial, you can count it in under administration also, is a concept called someone who has no legal heir, the property is now in the name of the government. So the revenue that comes from that property is what is escheat. Whatever the government is receiving from interest, whatever the profits and dividends it gets from PSUs. PSUs are different from government, they have a separate creation, either under a statutory corporation act or the Corporation Act or the Companies Act. There are three types of PSUs. One is the departmental undertaking. The second is Act of Parliament. And the third is the Companies Act. इन दोनों से जो प्रॉफिट डिविडेंड आता है वो यहाँ काउंट होगा. इसका जो पूरा रेवेन्यू है वो ऑलरेडी यहाँ काउंटेड है. Departmental undertaking, for example, the Ministry of Railways, Department of Post. So whatever revenue I get from this is already counted under the commercial revenue. From these two, since they are different from ministry, ये तो मिनिस्ट्री का पार्ट है, ये दोनों डिफरेंट है, तो ये सिर्फ जो प्रॉफिट डिविडेंड देते हैं वो काउंट होगा अंडर नॉन टैक्स, बिकॉज गवर्नमेंट इज द ओनर. Total revenue will not be counted. Why? Because these are separate entities. This is what is your distinction of tax and non-tax revenue. What is the expenditure? The government can have expenditure on salaries, pensions, the welfare payments which the government is doing. See, when you say scheme के component है किस किस के लिए पैसे मिल रहे हैं, तो वो component के हिसाब से define होगा, asset बन रहा है या revenue ही है. Largely welfare payment or what you can say is subsidy. Anything else? the interest which the government can escheat. This is from those properties which do not have a legal heir or claimant. So the property is in the name of the government, I get revenue from it, that is non-tax heir. In fact, one more thing here is added. The money which the government gets from spectrum allocation is a non-tax revenue receipt. Expenditure, salary, pensions, welfare payments, interest paid, anything else? सेम सैलरीज पेंशन जो डिफेंस को देते हैं वो यहाँ काउंट होती है, बट डिफेंस का कुछ इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर एसेट बनता है तो वो कैपिटल में. There is a three distinction of administration. One is general administration, the second is defense administration, the third is judicial administration. So when we talk about the salaries and pensions, usually reference is made to the general administration. But defense की भी जो salaries pensions है वो यहाँ expenditure में count होंगी. This is what is your revenue head without having an impact on asset liability. There are more heads also, but now you get an idea कि distinction कैसे हो रहा है. Revenue, receipts, and revenue expenditure, capital receipts and capital expenditure. Is the budget classification clear? Spectrum allocation जो airwaves देते हैं for this telecom. The airwaves given to these telecoms, you get a revenue. The Ministry of Telecom will allocate spectrum 4G, 5G spectrum, 2G spectrum का इतना केस हुआ था कि ऑक्शन से नहीं दिया था, गवर्नमेंट ने खुद दे दिया तो इतना नुकसान हो गया है. So when I allocate those airwaves for conducting this function of telecom, those things will earn me revenue. तो वो एयरवेज रेंट एक तरह से मान लो. इनफैक्ट रिसेंटली द होल केस ऑफ द वोडाफोन एडजस्टेड ग्रॉस रेवेन्यू AGR केस, कि हाउ विल आई कैलकुलेट दैट पर्टिकुलर स्पेक्ट्रम फीस एंड लाइसेंस फीस. दिस इज द वोडाफोन केस जहाँ पे उनको थोड़ा रिलीफ मिल गया है. द एडजस्टेड ग्रॉस रेवेन्यू द होल. इज दिस आइडिया क्लियर? नाउ पोस्ट दिस यू अंडरस्टैंड द आइडिया ऑफ डेफिसिट. This classification plus deficit had 3 questions in the prelims last year. One was on the distinction. 2 other questions were on the deficit calculations. First, when I have revenue mismatch, that means I spend more and I earn less. This is what is called as revenue deficit. So revenue deficit is when revenue expenditure is more than. Why this revenue deficit is a problem? Why this revenue deficit is seen as a very big problem? Any particular government should not have revenue deficit. Fiscal FRBM Act in 2003 said revenue deficit should be reduced to 0. What is the present target of revenue deficit? What is the deficit target of our fiscal deficit? 4.3. Revenue deficit? It is 1.5%. The revenue deficit, this is mentioned in the budget documents which have to be presented along with FRBM. तो जो fiscal medium term fiscal policy statement है उसमें ये 6 के targets होता है. Primary deficit is 0.5, revenue deficit is 1.5. Revenue deficit is revenue expenditure minus receipt. What is the problem with this concept? The problem is if you have to fill this deficit, where is the money going to come from? Borrowing for what purpose? You are doing the consumption purpose, the borrowing for consumption purpose. This is where you will have to take out from other sectors. This is why this is seen as a problem. In order to say that not all revenue expenditure is a problem, the government created a concept of effective. Some of the revenue expenditure is given for creation of assets by the states. So I will remove those particular grants which I have given to states for capex. This is now my effective revenue expenditure minus the revenue receipts. This will become my effective. So if you just rearrange the terms, you'll get revenue deficit minus grants to states for capex. No longer the government is calculating effective revenue deficit post 2018 change in FRBM. So in the budget document, the grants to state for capex, they are trying to mention it under the capital head. कि इससे एसेट बन रहा है, इसलिए जो पैसे हमने कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर के लिए दिए हैं वो रेवेन्यू हेड में काउंट ना करके हम कैपिटल हेड में काउंट कर लें. Is this clear? Revenue deficit and effective revenue deficit. Now from this, how do we calculate the fiscal deficit, or what is the fiscal deficit? First, from this it will understand how it is the borrowings of the government. How do we calculate budget deficit? That is the total expenditure minus total receipts. the total expenditure of the government is revenue plus capital expenditure minus the revenue receipt plus. Now this component will always turn out to be 0. Why? Why is it set to 0? You can't set anything to 0. It has to balance out. आपके कहने से थोड़ी चीजें 0 हो जाएंगी. Why is it 0 always? Because one of your capital, what are capital receipts? What are capital receipts? Money earned by selling asset or taking liability. That means it is debt receipts and other, you can say, non-debt creating receipts. Now, no matter how much expenditure you increase, you can always increase this component. If I add more revenue here, 10,000, I can increase borrowing by 10,000. If I increase it by 50,000, I can increase my borrowing by. So this is always going to balance out. Is this making sense? So we don't calculate the budget deficit. All the more if we see the changes politically post 1980s, budget surplus used to be seen as something good, where the government earns more, spends less. But post 1980, the deficit budgets are seen good, where the government spends more, even if it is earning less. That means the government is borrowing. This is why fiscal deficit became important. Now, if this figure is 0, I can take this debt capital receipt to the other side. My debt capital receipts would be equal to whatever my revenue expenditure is, my capital expenditure is, minus my revenue receipt plus non-debt capital receipt. इस debt capital receipt को जो एक साल में ली है, this is what is called as the debt capital receipts which I have taken in the budget this year is what I am calling as fiscal deficit. That is total expenditure minus non-debt creating revenue on the revenue head and capital head. इसमें debt नहीं बन रहा है. Fiscal deficit, if you rearrange, revenue receipt minus plus capital expenditure minus. Now why this is important? I will take fiscal deficit either for filling my, or I will take it for building my infrastructure or giving a loan. That will be my. दो पर्पसेस के लिए आपने बोरोइंग करनी है, रेवेन्यू डेफिसिट के लिए या कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर जो आपका कैपिटल रिसीट से नहीं आ रहा है. You earned 50,000, you spend 80,000 on capital head. This type of expenditure is considered good. This type of expenditure is considered. Because if you are doing it, this fiscal deficit is revenue deficit plus this component. If this component is more, that means you are borrowing only for consumption. You are not borrowing for. ये है आपका consumption related deficit, and this is your asset related deficit. If it is taken for this purposes, definitely you are building better for the future. If it is taking here, you are only taking for consumption. That means आपका ये नहीं हो पाएगा, because you are mostly doing it for consumption purposes. Is this clear? This also has an overlap with FRBM. Now, if FRBM says that the fiscal deficit has to be reduced, and after 2018, it has said revenue deficit का कोई target नहीं है. If the fiscal deficit is reduced by reducing this, what will be the long-term implication on the economy? दोनों side implication है वैसे. If the FRBM is saying fiscal deficit has to be reduced, first, if I reduce this component and not this, what is the problem? I have a problem for my capacity of the future is compromised. But if I have this component, despite this, that means if I reduce this, then what is the problem? Revenue expenditure में ऐसा क्या है जो compromise हो सकता है? This is clear that if I compromise this, I have a future problem for capex. If I compromise this, what is the problem? Day-to-day business ऐसा कौन सा expenditure है जिसका impact है? I am spending money on which has a component of. So I will reduce my expenditure done on Manrega. I will not give that money. So today I have welfare problems. In future I will have. Is the deficit component making sense? It had 2 questions last year on this. They gave certain figures and then asked you to calculate all of this. Now, we have understood what is revenue deficit, what is its implication, effective revenue deficit and fiscal deficit. There could be some deficit which you have taken for borrowing of the past. That means whatever borrowing I've done, from this borrowing I also have to pay certain interest payments. This is what is called as primary deficit. These 4 deficits is what the meaning which you want to know. Jiska question they can ask again. Revenue, effective, fiscal and primary deficit. Are the meaning of all of the deficits clear? Any doubt here? Is this clear? Now, how do we finance this deficit? With this, we'll understand the debt profile of the government. From where does the government find this money? First, fiscal deficit or debt में क्या difference है? I'll explain the debt profile of the government, the classification part. What is happening where you will understand from the survey and budget documents. What is the difference between the two? Flow and stock. What's the difference? इसका implication क्या है? Fiscal deficit is telling me this year how much borrowing I have to do. Fiscal deficit is a concept which talks about borrowing of any one particular year. Okay, this year I have a mismatch. I am going to borrow 3.3% of GDP, just an example. Now this mismatch was present last year also, was present before that also. That means I also have an accumulated debt. Every year I add to whatever I am borrowing. This debt has interest. और fiscal deficit से जो मैं interest minus कर लूँ वहाँ से मुझे समझ आ जाएगा. Meaning of 2 is clear? Now, if the government has to borrow for 1 year, what are the sources from where the government can borrow? I told you government borrowing document is government securities. Now, what type of government securities government can issue? If it is long term, it is issuing for short term. Yes, anything else from where the government can borrow? Apart from this, cash management will be. Anything else from apart from this? These are the 3 major things where the government borrows. I'll tell you all 3. First, second. The other, the government can borrow from FPI investment in all of the 3. The government can borrow externally. Externally, I can borrow from multilateral sources or any other borrowing which the government can do. Rupee debt is this only securities. How ये securities और ये जो external, ये तो external debt तो ये multilateral sources you have an idea what they are, bilateral you have an idea and FPI you have an idea. ये government securities में कौन invest करता है? Who will invest in this? This is mostly done by banks. Why? Banks have SLR. SLR में उनको securities में पैसा रखना है तो वो तो उनको तो खरीदना ही है. Who else can do that? Insurance companies, they are sitting on a lot of funds. Pension companies, they are sitting. In fact, the whole market can do it. These are the 3 major players. 2021, the government also allowed retail to buy it directly. Earlier, they were buying it in the secondary market. Now they can buy it directly. They can directly through the retail gilt account with the RBI, they can buy these securities when they are issued for the first time. This was called as the retail direct scheme. The only thing which you ought to know, in 2021, they've already asked when the scheme was launched. They do it through a portal which is called as Negotiated Dealing Settlement Order Matching System. But the difference is, since the retail players are directly competing with big players, so I believe they will not be able to know what exactly is the price at which they have to bid. Since the bidding happens in tunes of 5 crores and multiples of 5 crores, I believe out of the 4 players, this player is so small, he will not be able to outbid them or will not understand the dynamics of the market. So retail players are allowed to buy the securities directly, but they are not allowed to participate in the auction. This is auction mein, how they are able to participate, they are only going to tell the quantity. They can't tell the, that means retail players can only participate through a non-competitive bidding. 3 statements were asked. Retail investors are allowed directly, which platform, and one more related to feature of the scheme. It has already been asked in 2021. This is how the government can borrow by issuing these securities. There's a third way also. How the government can borrow. From where the government can borrow. You know what is the concept of monetization of? What is monetization of deficit? When the government borrows from, so how is it monetizing? What happens here is government will issue a security to the RBI and the RBI is going to give them the, why is it monetization of deficit? Why is it monetization of deficit? The thing is new money is created, but this new money can also go back when the government repays the RBI. Why is it a problem then? This concept was discontinued post 97 and the FRBM categorically says this cannot be done. 2003 FRBM said primary issuance of the government cannot be bought by RBI. It can only be done if the government needs an, and how much it can do? It can only do, it can ask the RBI to fund this. This is an escape clause as passed by the FRBM in 2018. Why this is not a good thing to do? Inflation, anything else? See, the biggest problem is when I know I have the government security, trust and all दो तो सब ये तो permanently बहुत साल किया है 40 साल तक ये auction treasury bill दे के ही सारा monetize किया है. Now, when I'm issuing the securities to RBI, I don't have to sell this to the market. That means whatever the discipline that comes from the market on its yield, I told you state development loans की yield बढ़ रही है, market enforce कर रहा है. Why? They are borrowing more. But if I have only to issue to RBI, will there be a discipline? Market said give me 6%. Why? Because the condition is such. Market said give me 7% because the conditions are changing. But can the RBI say give me 6%, 7%? That means I can take this security at very less interest rate. The first major problem of government borrowing from the RBI is that there is no discipline on the government on the interest rate. It can issue this security to RBI at a very less interest rate. This is almost a subsidized loan which it is getting from the RBI. Because if it had to issue the security in the market, there would be discipline enforced on them that you are borrowing too much, I am going to take more percentage from you. But if I have only one player to which I have to give the security, I cannot enforce that discipline. Is this clear? The second problem is, if I have issued this government security, the RBI has to get this money back. After say 10 years, I have taken 50,000 from them, 50,000 I have to return. What if I don't return the 50,000, I issue them the government security again? After completion of 10 years, I don't give them the money back. Instead, I issue them another security. So, pehli transaction hui, I gave them a government security and I took certain money from them. Next transaction happened, I had to pay the money back, but instead what I did was I issued them a, that means this security will never be allowed to mature. I will keep on rolling over the debt. This rolling over the debt is what is adding permanent money in the economy, which is causing ये मैच्योरिटी पे पैसे वापस नहीं मिल रहा, रोल ओवर हो रहा है, इसीलिए ये इन्फ्लेशन है. This is why this practice of no market discipline and permanent money creation is why this is being discouraged. Is this making sense? Now, if this is discouraged, what should the RBI do? Or what exactly is the, if the government needs money, is there any other facility available? What is ways and means advances? And where is it mentioned? छोटी छोटी चीजें ही पता होनी चाहिए. Temporary mismatches, so how exactly? Is it backed by some law? Is it just an agreement? How is it happening? (1937) में सेंटर गवर्नमेंट के लिए स्टार्ट हो गया था एंड 1954 में स्टेट के लिए स्टार्ट हो गया था. Operationalize after 97. Till 97 it was not operationalized. Why? Because I was constantly doing this. After 97 I have this option. What is this option? The government can take money from RBI, but this money is going to come at a discipline. plus this has to be returned within, ये repo और 3 months दोनों act में लिखे. I had two major problem of RBI borrowing with the government, that they were not returning the money back, rollover of debt. And second, I had a problem that there was no market discipline on interest rate. I have introduced a facility where it is repo, and this is called as ways and means advances. What is the limit which they can, how much they can borrow? What is the limit? And who decides the limit? It's the central government along with, and they will decide every 6 months how much the government can borrow. This is what is called as ways and means advances for the center. This is another borrowing. Does this facility exist for state? What is the facility called? First, in this, there is another facility of overdraft. If you are not able to return the money within 90 days, you can extend it for 10 days, but here you will have to pay repo plus 2. Again and again, why repo, repo plus 2? So that you have some amount of discipline. Overdraft is 90 days, may not able to pay, you can extend it for 10 days. If you want more amount, you can also extend it for 10 days, and you'll have to pay repo plus 2. So both time and amount you can extend for 10. उस जितना बाद में जो हमारी एक लिमिट है इस पे, उससे ज्यादा पैसे लिए वो सिर्फ 10 दिन के लिए ले सकते हो. 90 डेज तक जो आपने पैसे लिए लिमिट के अंदर, वो अगर इफ यू डिड नॉट पे विद इन 90, देन यू कैन आल्सो एक्सटेंड इट फॉर 10. दोनों केसेस में रेपो प्लस 2 होगा, टाइम पे भी और अमाउंट पे भी. देन देयर इज नो स्पेसिफिक डिसिप्लिन. स्टेट के केस में उन्होंने बोला हम आपको पेमेंट स्टॉप कर देंगे. I'll stop all the payments which I have to make from you. In center case, they don't have that. Center does not reach that particular point because this is going to impact a lot of their credibility in the market. Is this clear? For states, what are the facilities available? There are two types of facilities available. One is called as normal ways and means advances, and the other is called as the special drawing facility. This is different from the SDF for the banks. It's not a deposit facility, it is a special drawing facility. Now, what happens in special drawing facility is, if these states have made an investment in certain government securities, you can get the particular amount at repo minus 1. Certain securities may in the last 1 year, if you have made annual investments, you can get it at repo minus 1. There are two reserve funds which the states have with the RBI. One is called as the Guarantee Redemption Fund and the Consolidated Sinking Fund. If you have made investment in these two, then you can get the loan at repo minus. What exactly is the meaning of this? You understand amortization of debt? What is EMI? EMI का concept क्या है? The concept of EMI is that I have principal plus interest which I have calculated for your loan. I am breaking down this into small parts which you can pay periodically. This particular process is what is called as amortization, covering of the intangible asset. Have you heard about depreciation? What is depreciation? Depreciation is what? Decrease in value. So what do we do with decrease in value? वो तो asset की पड़े पड़े भी decrease in value हो रही है, use होके भी decrease in value हो रही है. So what do we do? What is depreciation there? A particular asset is losing value. So how do you cover for that loss in value? You start depositing a provision. आप अपने accounts में हर साल कुछ percentage रखते हो कि value का cover है. So if I bought something for 1 lakh rupees, I think 10% इसकी value depreciate हो रही है. One of my expenditures in my sheets is that I am keeping a provision of 10,000 every month to cover for this. Every month or say every year I have to cover for this. This particular provision, which is an expenditure I have done to cover for the loss of value, in case of a tangible asset, is what is called as depreciation. If this provision is for an intangible asset, for example, loan आपका एक intangible asset है. If you do it for intangible asset, this is called as amortization. Have you heard of this term? What is this? Earnings before interest, tax, deductions, depreciation and amortization. Now amortization makes sense. तो आरबीआई ने स्टेट्स को बोला you all have loans, so you break your loans into small parts, and this part is something you deposit in a particular account which is called as consolidated sinking fund. तो आप एक ईएमआई डिपॉजिट करो आरबीआई के पास so that your loan gets covered. This fund is called as consolidated sinking fund. If every month I'm making a payment here of 10,000, but in one particular month I made a 5,000 incremental payment. Every month for breaking my debt into equal parts, I was paying EMI of 10,000. It can happen in some years that you can pay more than EMI. When you pay more than EMI, the RBI says, आप special drawing facility में repo minus 2 पे पैसे ले लेना. If in the last 1 year you have deposited more amount as opposed to what you were doing regularly in this fund, you can take the loan from us at repo minus 2. This consolidated sinking fund is an amortization fund created by the RBI for states. This is a reserve fund that I am depositing money in this fund with the RBI to cover for my loan. If I make an annual payment here, which is more than my regular payment, I can get the loan at repo minus. Is this making sense? I'll explain again. In a particular financial year, I had to deposit 10,000 in my consolidated sinking fund. Is the meaning of amortization and sinking fund clear? What I have done in this financial year is, I also have added 5,000 more because my finances were good. Now at this particular point, I had to take money from the RBI under ways and means advances. So if the RBI says, if you have made this, you can take the loan from us at repo minus. If you have put extra money in another account that is called as guarantee redemption fund, you can take the loan at repo minus 2. If you have made an additional investment in government securities, you can get this at repo minus 1. ये 3 facilities को हम बोल रहे हैं special drawing facility. SDF is a borrowing facility of the states from the RBI. In special circumstances, if they have made in annual incremental investment in CSF, GRF or securities. Securities के लिए repo minus 1 rate रहेगा. इन दो funds के लिए repo minus 2. I'll tell you guarantee redemption fund also. Is consolidated sinking fund and amortization clear? These 3 special drawing facility. Now, consolidated sinking fund was created by RBI for the states in order to cover their debt को amortize किया कि EMIs अपनी यहाँ डालो. This is what I called as the consolidated sinking fund. Another thing that can happen is state governments might have taken a loan from, or the PSUs of state governments had taken a loan from the market, but this particular loan can be guaranteed by state. For example, center की एक body है FCI. FCI is the one which is responsible for food subsidy distribution. Food subsidies, the subsidy burden is around 2 to 2.3 lakh crore rupees. Now, if FCI has to take a loan from the market says we don't trust you, आप कोई guarantor लेके आओ. Who's the owner of FCI? It's the center. Now the center says, I am going to give you a guarantee that if FCI does not pay, I will pay you. If the FCI does not pay, I am the guarantor, I am going to give you the money. This type of a liability which is on the center, this is a liability which will only be a liability when the failure happens. This is what is called as contingent liability. कि अगर वो फेल कर गए तो ही हमें पैसे देने हैं. There is a high chance they might not fail. But what if they fail? Center will have to find money to pay this contingent liability. Thus, RBI says, contingent liability को cover करने के लिए एक fund बना लो. अगर problem आएगी इस fund से पैसे निकाल के दे देना. This is called as guarantee redemption fund. Idea is, coming back to states, I explained through a state body example. center body example. State government is taking a guarantee for a loan for state PSU. They are being the guarantor for this. When they are being the guarantor, they will be asked to pay only when the PSU fails. That means this is not a liability, this is a liability based on a condition. This is why it is called as a. तो अब ये स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को अगर गारंटी भरनी पड़ेगी तो पैसे कहां से आएंगे? So RBI says इन गारंटीज को कवर करने के लिए you create a fund which they call as guarantee. Make every year make some payments here. Use these payments when this happens. Otherwise you have money ready for guarantee redemptions. Now what the RBI in ways and means advances says, every month, every year you are putting 10,000 here. किसी ईयर आपने अगर 5,000 एक्स्ट्रा डाले हैं, उस ईयर में आप हमसे यू कैन टेक अ लोन एट रेपो माइनस. So amortization and guarantee redemption. The states have two funds with the RBI. If you make annual incremental payment there, you will get a loan at lesser interest rate. Is this clear? So now states have two types of facilities. States can borrow from the RBI under special ways and means advances, which is what we are calling as SDF. If this SDF I do by investing in government securities, I am going to get it at repo minus 1. If I invest this money in consolidated sinking fund or guarantee, I will get it at repo minus 2. कितना पैसा ले सकते हो दोनों में? This limit is to be decided by every 6 months RBI will decide the limit. Then once the limit is exhausted here, you've made investments, you've taken the loans, you can then take a normal WMA. This will happen at, so once you have done this, or you have not done this, you don't want to take this, you also have a normal WMA where you take a loan at repo rate. If this repo rate you can take for, if you are not able to pay this within 90 days, you get an overdraft. Overdraft in the case of state is happening at repo plus 1. अगर आपका extension ये मिलेगा 14 days का, in pandemic they had increased it to, तो अगर आप 90 days में पैसे वापस नहीं कर पाए, आप 21 तक extend कर सकते हो, but तब मिलेगा repo plus. And in case you want more money than what your limit is, I have specified this both for the case where I have drawn the, every 6 months I am drawing what exactly are the limits of states which they can borrow from. Center के case में center plus RBI will decide. In states it will be the RBI which decides. So I have discussed the limits. If I could not pay, I have charged you an overdraft. What if you want more money? In that particular case, you have an overdraft where if you want up to 100% of your limit, कि आपने, your limit is 50,000 and you want 50,000 more, that means up to the limit. If you are up to the limit, you will have to pay repo plus. What if you have taken 50,000 and now you're demanding 1 lakh? You're demanding more than the limit. That means over 100% limit if you demand, then you will have to pay repo plus. बट ये हम 5 दिन के लिए देंगे. 5 दिन के बाद आपको बोलेंगे ये चीजें कंट्रोल करने के लिए. ये अगर कंट्रोल नहीं हुई तो वी आर गोइंग टू स्टॉप ऑल पेमेंट्स टू. This is what is ways and means advances that exist for state governments. For the center government, there is only one, that is where borrowing happens at repo happens for, and you get 10-day. और पैसे लेने हैं तो उसकी लिमिट नहीं है जैसे यहाँ पे बनाई है. This is for, and the limit for this is decided by center plus RBI. And all of this got its backing from the RBI Act. Section 17(5) में लिखा है ये. नॉर्मल WMA की डेफिनेशन है, वहां पे 90 डेज के लिए आप रेपो रेट पे पैसा ले सकते हो. Is this clear? Any doubt in understanding of this? There could be a question framed on special drawing facility. Deposit facility, reverse repo वाला operation है. This is a drawing facility where states borrow from the RBI. Are the dynamics of all of this clear? Now you understood what all the from where the center government borrows. What are the options which the center government borrows? Then I'll show you the debt profile of the center government. From where does the center government borrow? One, it borrows from the market by issuing bonds. इसमें participants बहुत सारे हैं. Second, it borrows from RBI under, and finally it borrows from. Is there any other internal source from where the government borrows apart from market? Have you heard of National Small Savings Fund? What is this? National Small Savings Fund. There are a set of saving schemes called the small saving schemes. One type of a small saving scheme is post office deposits. Different types of schemes available. जब banking activity spread नहीं है, to inculcate the savings activity in the population, the government started these schemes. ये Ministry of Finance run करती है. The interest rate is decided by them on whatever the small savings rates will be. One is post office deposits, the other is social security schemes. Have you heard of Sukanya Samriddhi? Or the State Provident Fund? All of this is social security scheme. Then you have a third type of small saving schemes that is called as saving certificates, national saving certificates. The Kisan Vikas Patra. एक तीसरा भी लॉन्च किया अभी, वेरी फेमस. इसके फीचर्स ही आ सकता है. महिला सम्मान सर्टिफिकेट 2 साल के लिए इतना लॉक इन है and all that. Now these three things were created by the government so that the economy starts saving more. Just like you have an option with the banks, since I don't have a very well spread banking in 1950s, 60s, I started giving them this also. This continues till date. Old age pension scheme, social security में बहुत सारी हैं. Now this is public provident fund. Now when these schemes, this money has to go somewhere. In the year 99, the government created a national small saving fund in the public account of India. There are 3 funds: consolidated, public account and contingency. So public account में एक national small savings fund बना है जिसका सारा पैसा जाएगा. ये liability government की है. The government is taking this money. Now when this account has received so much money, I can go to the market and issue government securities, or I can issue this government security to the NSSF itself, and NSSF is going to give this money to me which I can use. This is another major source of borrowing for the center government. Apart from borrowing from the market, it borrows by issuing special securities to NSSF. Money is accumulated. This accumulated money is used by the government and it pays an interest, just like the securities have interest. This is a public account fund. Same money can be used by state governments also. 14th Finance Commission said, state governments, if taking money from NSSF, is very costly. So you should not take it. Based on their recommendation, most states have stopped. Only 3 states are taking: Delhi, Kerala and Madhya Pradesh. So जो भी small savings fund का पैसा आया, that money has gone to NSSF. Government issued a security to NSSF and gave them the money. Government is going to pay an interest rate here. Is this clear? This is slightly tricky here because NSSF का बाकी liability is also government liability. These are for special purposes. This is for your own social security, that the money is going to come for a particular purpose. So Sukanya Samriddhi, post 18 years, this is the lump sum amount you can take, interest is this. They have another defined purpose. तो ये स्कीम आपकी बेनिफिट के लिए है. ये एक इन्वेस्टमेंट इंस्ट्रूमेंट है जिसका पैसा हम यूज कर सकते हैं. तो जितना मनी इसमें कलेक्ट हुआ came to, so for example, you have bought this particular thing. महिला सम्मान सर्टिफिकेट आपको एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट मिल गया कि लेट मी इन्वेस्ट माय मनी इन दिस सिक्योरिटी, जस्ट लाइक यू आर इन्वेस्टिंग इन गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटी, अदर सिक्योरिटीज. You have given money to the government under this by buying this security. This money the government deposited under. Now I'm taking it from by issuing them securities again. ऐसे पोस्ट ऑफिस डिपॉजिट, ये टाइप ऑफ इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स डिफरेंट है, पर्पस सेम है सबका, दैट आई वांट टू इनकलकेट. You don't consume, you save also. Don't go to the bank, save with these three formal instruments. You decide what this has features, this has different features. जैसे 2 साल का है, उसका लॉक इन पीरियड 18 years का है, इन्वेस्टमेंट लिमिट्स अलग है. Are these clear? The money has gone to NSSF. Now with this, if I draw the debt profile of the government, understand this carefully, a classification you'll find tricky. The deficit part is clear, financing part is clear from where the money has been taken. That means the government is borrowing from two sources, external and internal. Now, what are the internal sources? In the internal sources, I have borrowed money from the market. How have I borrowed money from the market? 3 securities, that is dated, T-bills and cash management bill. Apart from that, I have also issued some non-marketable securities. That means you're not able to sell it, ये आपको अपने पास ही रखनी है. What are the example of non-marketable securities? For example, I have taken money from NSSF. This includes special securities which I have issued to NSSF. Just like there is NSSF, I can also issue these special securities to another fund called Post Office Life Insurance Fund or Rural Post Office Life Insurance Fund. Now, similar to this, NSSF is an account which is getting money from what? This is getting money from small savings, and the government is using money for this. Process is clear. Similarly, the post office has started a life insurance fund. It's distributing life insurance. If it is distributing life insurance, this is some money not everyone will take. Claim तो सबका नहीं होगा, but मेरा corpus बहुत बड़ा बन गया. So post office has a lot of money which can be utilized. So the government can take this debt and issue them, just like I issued a government security to NSSF. Both of these securities are part of my debt, are the non-marketable debt which I have issued. Another part of non-marketable debt which the government can issue, if I have to give money as contribution to being members of World Bank or ADB. Just an example, there could be international institutions of which I have to become a part. The government has to give them money to become a part of this. What if the government says, I don't have money to give you, instead of money, I am going to give you this can also be done. Now this government security which these institutions are holding, is this a debt for the government? You have to pay them back because आपसे उन्होंने बोला था when you join World Bank से pay is 1 lakh rupees. You said I don't have 1 lakh, I'm going to give you a security of 1 lakh. So this security of 1 lakh you have to give them someday. So that means this is a debt which you have taken. This is another non-marketable special security issued to international institutions as part of the contribution. This particular special security is a non-interest security. You don't have to pay the interest on this. One instrument taking money from NSSF, taking money from insurance, post office insurance, giving money to as contribution but did not pay them, took a debt. Similar thing, we have heard about the sovereign gold bond. What is this particular instrument? The sovereign gold bond is an instrument issued by the government. What is the government saying? That at the end of the maturity, we are going to give you the price of gold, and is there an interest? So is this bond a debt for the government? Government has taken money for giving you this bond. This is the four type of non-marketable security which is called as compensation bonds, which includes sovereign health or any particular disaster bond, any particular bond where I did not give you the money. I have taken this or given this instrument to you. Are these marketable and non-marketable securities clear? These two, along with external debt, the three forms which I told you, this is what is called as the public debt of the country. Internal debt, which includes marketable securities, external debt, which includes bilateral, multilateral, and other government debt. These three components together are what is called as public debt. This public debt is what the government has taken on the consolidated fund. Now you understand fiscal deficit इसमें कैसे आएगा? Is it clear? Non-marketable securities में you can also mention the loan which you have taken without giving a with the RBI. So now you see all the fiscal deficit components are covered under public debt. This shows that the public debt is something which is contracted on. इसीलिए हर बार fiscal deficit budget में vote होगा, because it is taken on consolidated fund. Are these components clear? 1 plus 2 is what is internal debt. 1 plus 2 plus 3 is what is called as public debt. Now, apart from this, the government also has taken money in the public account of India. For example, the government has the government employees money which has been deposited under provident fund. This is called as a state provident fund. Then the government has also taken money in, also government can create special type of, this is also liability of the government. Whatever money you have of the government employees under PF, the state provident fund, this is your liability, you have to pay them back. This is national small savings fund, जो आपने महिला सम्मान सर्टिफिकेट पे पैसा लिया वो भी आपको देना है. What is included here is all the savings which go here, there is somewhere I have given a special security. So 10,000 is what I received, 2,000 का मैंने वो debt दे दिया government को, and this remaining is 8,000 here. So liability will be 8,000 plus whatever I have interest I have received from this. In the National Small Savings Fund, I have accumulated total 10,000. 2,000 is something which the government has taken from me, and this I have included under. Remaining is my public account liability, क्योंकि 2,000 मेरी earning के form में वापस आएंगे. So here money is only after deduction of this is what I count here. These two together, along with extra budgetary resource, internal, external, public account and extra budgetary resource, is what is called as the total central government debt, or what you can say is a total central government liability. एक component है आपका public fund, public debt जो consolidated fund पे लिया. दूसरा component है public account liability. तीसरा component है, I'll tell you extra budget resources. A plus B plus C is what we are calling as, जिसमें से public debt is on consolidated fund, fiscal deficit यहाँ है सारा. This is other liability जो मैंने debt नहीं लिया था. People deposited money with me. This is not my debt. This is my public account. मैंने अपनी borrowing purposes के लिए नहीं लिया है. My borrowing purposes was this, which I am calling as, this is the public debt component. This is my liability, which was actually not my borrowing. I have done it for other purposes. And the extra budgetary resources also. I'll tell you what these are. But are these three component clear? Difference between public debt, public account liability, and the total government debt. Apart from this, if I say, what is the state government total debt I have taken? This is called as the general government debt. इसके तीन कंपोनेंट हो गए, A, B and C. State government add कर दो, this will become the, for example, FRBM said, or the government right now said, we are going to reduce our total debt to 50 plus minus 1. तो वो इसका बोल रहे हैं हम 50 plus minus 1 पे लाएंगे, जो अभी 57 के आसपास है. State government is somewhere around 20%, 25, 27%. Combination of two is what we call as center 57, 58. They wanted to reduce it to 50. See, these number and analysis you will do in the economic survey classes or when you read the survey. But it should make sense what number we are talking about and what exactly is included in the debt. The whole class is to give you the brief on what exactly is debt, deficit, and all the related things of ways and means, advance, and everything. Is this component clear? Extra budgetary resource. Now, what is the meaning of this extra budgetary resource? The government had an expenditure of food subsidy which it had to pay to FCI. This is different from government guarantee. Ye debt government ki hi hai. But how or what exactly is the financial play behind this? I have to make this expenditure because FCI has done the food subsidy burden for me. But what instead I say is, I can't pay you this money. You take money from the market by issuing them securities. This particular security is actually the debt burden of the government. But today I was able to financially manipulate my budget because since I saved on the expenditure, I saved on my. तो आज जो बर्डन मुझे मिलेगा वो इस सिक्योरिटी पे सिर्फ इंटरेस्ट मिलेगा, टोटल एक्सपेंडिचर नहीं मिलेगा. This type of a borrowing when a government does is what is called as extra budgetary or off budget. I had to pay them, and for paying them, I had to increase my fiscal deficit. I did not pay them. Instead, I asked them to borrow from the market. When I asked them to borrow from the market, I have reduced my fiscal deficit. But this borrowing which they have done from the market has to be paid eventually by the, this is what is called as extra budgetary. Is this making sense? What is? डेफिसिट में काउंट नहीं होगा, इसीलिए तो उनसे करवाया. FCI एक स्टैट्यूटरी कॉर्पोरेशन है. They have their own balance sheet. They bought it on the balance sheet in the name of the government. तो पर उनके बैलेंस शीट पे है, जब इसका मैच्योरिटी होगा गवर्नमेंट पे करेगा. बट टुडे आई हैव रिड्यूस्ड माय. Are all of these components clear? Any doubt in understanding this deficit and debt? Is this clear? Now, one last component which I'll discuss, FRBM in detail, I'll discuss tomorrow. Considering all of this debt and also the deficits which government take, why do we need to control this? Why can't the government take any fiscal deficit and then lead to the, हम ये debt बढ़ा क्यों नहीं सकते? I can make any type of expenditures which I want. I can solve a lot of social security issues, welfare problems, I can create employment. Let the government increase its expenditure multiple times than what exactly the receipts it is getting. अगर ये government ने कर लिया तो government को, what's a problem with high deficits or high debt? Why should we have discipline here? What do you mean by sustainability? This is the reason why we have FRBM. FRBM के features and all I'll discuss tomorrow along with center-state relations and another topic. Just here, discipline क्यों चाहिए? Now understand how this discipline is important for macroeconomic stability. ये जो हम बोल रहे हैं कि गवर्नमेंट हैज अचीव्ड मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी, इट इज वन ऑफ द रीजंस इज गवर्नमेंट हैज बीन एबल टू कंट्रोल फिस्कल डेफिसिट. दिस इज व्हाई इट इज सेड एज अ गोल्डीलॉक्स पोजीशन. स्वीट स्पॉट बन गया है. वो स्वीट स्पॉट इज व्हाट इज कॉल्ड एज macroeconomic stability. Now, macroeconomic stability, first thing is, if the government borrows more, what is the impact on inflation? The government fiscal deficit is going to increase its expenditure. Increasing the government expenditure is going to have an impact on what? Money supply पे कैसे होगा? How? मनी सप्लाई तो आरबीआई कंट्रोल्ड है. यहाँ पे कितना मनी है वो गवर्नमेंट के पास है या वो किसी और के पास है, वो फर्क पड़ सकता है. सप्लाई तो हम इंटरेस्ट रेट से हम कंट्रोल कर रहे हैं ना, लिक्विडिटी से. I can only transfer that money from taking from some households and giving to other households. इकोनॉमी की सप्लाई तो सेम रहेगी. बोरोइंग यही तो है, किसी से लेके फिर वो स्पेंड करना शुरू कर दिया. That expenditure I have taken from 10 households, but I distributed amongst 500. So what will happen here? Money supply is still the same, क्योंकि सप्लाई में प्रिंट थोड़ी हुआ था. सप्लाई तो मोनेटाइजेशन में बढ़ जाती. What has happened here? I have taken from 10 households and I distributed amongst 500. क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट जो भी एक्सपेंडिचर करेगी, या तो वो हाउस होल्ड के पास जाएगा या वो फर्म के पास जाएगा. सब्सिडीज यहाँ जाएंगी, वेलफेयर पेमेंट्स यहाँ जाएंगी. सो व्हाट विल हैपन? द मोमेंट गवर्नमेंट स्पेंड्स दैट मनी and the government starts spending more, both the money goes here, the aggregate demand in the economy will, if the aggregate demand in the economy will increase, I will have a demand pull inflation. डेफिसिट का पहला कंसर्न है कि द डेफिसिट इज गोइंग टू क्रिएट डिमांड पुल इन्फ्लेशन. 1980 to 90s is this is what is happening. Government is borrowing money and spending the money on a lot of investment. The infrastructure projects is giving money in the form of welfare. Both the things is creating too much demand. Too much demand is what leads to your aggregate demand and your aggregate supply. ये एकदम बढ़ गया क्योंकि गवर्नमेंट ने स्पेंड करना बहुत ज्यादा शुरू कर दिया. This can be inflationary in its impact. Is this clear? What else is the stability impact? How is it impacting the external scenario? If the government starts borrowing more, if the government starts borrowing more, the aggregate demand in the economy increases. If the aggregate demand in the economy increases, is it increasing the demand for domestic goods or also for outside goods? दोनों चीज हो सकती है. इनसाइड गुड्स ये होगा, आउटसाइड गुड में आई विल हैव मोर डिमांड फॉर. If I have more demand for imports, from where will I get this money? Foreign exchange reserve कहाँ से आएगा? Imports are increasing. Where is the dollar behind it? This is where I am going to create a current account deficit on the back of fiscal deficit बढ़ा, aggregate demand बढ़ी, उससे current account deficit बढ़ा. This is what is the problem of twin deficit. And if this particular, the current account deficit increases, how will I give the money for this? ये पैसे कहाँ से आएंगे? ये borrowing से आएंगे. Borrowings from external sources is what is going to increase my external debt. So volatility is going from short term to long term. And secondly, this particular current account deficit can also come from dilution of my asset. हम बाहर की companies को अपने asset बेचने शुरू करते हैं. FDI is selling off the assets to someone else outside. If I do this, I have a problem that my internal debt issue became my 91 crisis. 91 crisis started from this point. Led to this thing in the domestic economy, led to this thing in the external economy. ये जब पैसे वापस नहीं दे पाए तो गोल्ड देना पड़ा. गोल्ड नहीं के बाद फिर वो डिफॉल्ट होता. IMF ने लोन देके बचाया. Now understand how fiscal deficit is problematic. What else could be the problem of fiscal deficit? You talk about the sustainability issue of debt. If I keep on compiling more debt, what will happen? I will have a lot of interest payments. That means the next borrowing which I have to do, I will have to do mostly for interest payments. My debt has increased to such a level that my interest payments, for this I don't have money which I'm earning, I have to borrow more. If I have to borrow more, again the interest payments will increase. This is what is called as a debt trap. Sustainability of debt. If I take too much debt, I also have to earn the interest rate for it. Otherwise, I'll have to keep on borrowing for interest payments only. Another problem here is when I am taking this money, too much of fiscal deficit, what will happen to my yield on government securities? I was issuing a government security at 5%. I started borrowing more. Next security is going to come at what percent? More percentage it can come at. If the government itself is getting the money at 6%, what will be the impact on the entire economy? I just now explained कि state government की yield बढ़ रही है, उससे interest rate पे क्या impact आएगा? The interest rate in the economy will increase. Not just the interest rate in the economy will increase, the borrowing amount which I have for the other players is also going to, this is for the market. This is what is called as crowding out. So you see what exactly is the impact on the fiscal deficit on the economy. Externally, twin deficit, debt sustainability problem. Internally, inflation. Internally, I have a problem of higher interest payments, debt trap. Internally, I have a problem of crowding out of the private sector investment. And finally, when I'm taking the fiscal deficit today, what exactly am I doing with this? इसका यूज कहाँ हो रहा है? इसका यूज हो सकता है for consumption purposes, and it can also be used for building of asset. Now, out of the two, if I do mostly for consumption purposes, how am I going to pay for fiscal deficit? ये debt आज तो ले लिया, इसका payment कौन करेगा? This is the future generation will have to pay from tax. What exactly is the benefit they have got from this? And what is the burden they have taken? The future tax and the benefit. तो present expenditure से future का क्या benefit है? This is what is called as intergenerational mobility issues, or sorry, intergenerational equity issues. The next generation is taking up the burden, present generation is taking up the benefit. The present generation is taking up benefit, whereas the future tax is what is the future generation taking up the burden. This now sets the stage for fiscal discipline. Because अगर आपने deficit बढ़ाया, आपकी economy में ये सारी problems आएंगी. Inflation, external environment, where current account deficit will then spill to capital account deficit also. You'll have a problem of debt traps, you'll have a problem of crowding out and intergenerational equity issues. This means the government has to have some amount of discipline, some amount of prudence, some amount of consolidation on deficit. In order to do this by law, the government passed the FRBM Act in 2003. Iske dynamics, basics of this, along with center-state relations, and if any other concept there is in the public finance policy. If not, I'll discuss external sector or money. Is this clear? Tomorrow we'll talk about issues from here, FRBM. Thank you.